And in this year's election, I encourage any woman of color to vote because our voices are, I feel, effective in this day and time, in this era. I feel like we have a voice that's bigger now than it has been before. In Black women, for sure, I know we have made an impact in our numbers as far as education, as far as, the statistics of striving above, the statistics that America has set for us.
Confession. I'm 29 years old and have never stood in line for a presidential election. Yes, please reprimand me. Beat me down with your watered down version of history. Tell me that my vote counts, but never tell me why. Because some thought that putting a black man in the presidential seat was enough to put a sparkle in my eye, but it wasn't. Until I learned that it was more than just me standing on that election line. I've heard stories of black women who fought wars far before my existence. It is called suffrage for a reason. In 1920, women were given the right to vote. But it wasn't until 1965 that black women were given that same privilege. Y'all, that was only 55 years ago. My mother is 51 years old, so that means that my grandmother grew up in a world where she didn't have the privilege to vote. So they are celebrating a centennial. We are celebrating a seat at the table. Picture this. Millions of women protesting for civil rights, and somehow your entire race gets missed. See, I stand on the election line for more than just me. I stand for those women who protested on that day in 1920 and now aren't alive to have that opportunity because it took over 55 years to see the fruits of their labor. I stand for my grandmother because when she was 29, she didn't have the privilege to stand in the election line. I stand for women like Ida B. Wells and Mary Church Terrell. I stand for my nieces because I will teach them that this is a privilege, one that somebody fought long and hard for them to have. I stand to make a statement. Because a great poet once told me that black women shook up the universe, but it is my belief that our vote will shift this nation. And that's one heck of a revelation. I write this poem for every woman who questioned what their votes mean. Take a deep dive into history. Because my textbooks only tells me stories about that fateful day in August of 1920. But sometimes history doesn't include everybody. It is those no-name unsung heroes that really push the needle, and who knows? Maybe the next history book can start with me. Whether it be standing in the election line or simply taking a knee, there's always more to the story. And this election is just the beginning.
It took 7 years to get this passed, and it took 7 years. It took, these women, endured a lot to get this voting passed. And so, especially for black women, we have had a lot of odds against us for the color of our skin, for just being a woman. And so it's definitely important that we express our voices and we express our opinions of who we want in office.
Good evening. How's everybody doing? If you're there, make some noise. Let me see you. I need to see some smiles and faces out here. Well, my name is Chirl Girl, and welcome to the Engage Her program, the JCSU edition. Let me hear some noise for Johnson C. Smith, y'all. Let me tell you what we're doing tonight. We are going to hear those voices, the diverse voices of the women's movement. And tonight, the Charlotte Mecklenburg Library, in partnership with the James B. Duke Memorial Library at Johnson C. Smith University, is uniting women all across the United States to celebrate. So we're going to have some fun, and we're going to recognize the struggle that led to the 19th Amendment that gave American women the right to vote. But you know what? So many times you don't hear our story. And tonight you get a chance to hear it. We get a chance to celebrate it. But first, let me take a moment to say thank you to Deshauna, Logan, and the Black Ink Poets for their performance. The group was started in 1994 by 4 Johnson C. Smith students who had a passion for poetry and a passion for African American positivity. And now More than a quarter of a century later, they are still standing strong on the campus, and they continue to work as the oldest non-Greek organization at JCSU. So congratulations to them, and thank you for that. Now we're going to open up the festivities with greetings from Dr. Karen D. Morgan, who serves as Johnson C. Smith University's Senior Vice President, and she is the Chief Academic Officer and responsible for all academic programs and personnel. Dr. Morgan has over 25 years of experience in higher education and has received numerous honors and awards throughout her career. There's so many to name, but I had to give you this one. Her selections, and that's selections with an S, as a network of mathematical sciences, mathematically gifted and Black honoree. Y'all better show some love for this amazingly intelligent woman. Dr. Morgan, the stage is yours.
Thank you, Chirl Girl. Good evening, everyone. On behalf of President Clarence D. Armbrister, I bring you greetings and welcome you to tonight's Engage Her program, Diverse Voices of Women in the Movement. As we focus on Black women leadership, activism, and the importance of voting in 2020, let us pause to salute those who fought and continue to fight valiantly. Their sacrifices bear fruit even on this evening as we gather. Their sacrifices give birth to a newborn sense of liberation, resurrecting that which flows from within the confines of ebony waters that run deep into the Nile. Come, journey with us, bask in the glow of the African sun, dance until you move the sky. Connect the stars to awaken your inner warrior. Makes life's patched quilt familiar. Hear the whispered heartbeats of native blood, singing songs of joy and sorrow and laughter and tears. Singing songs from the iron bellies of mighty storytellers. Words that are transfixed as testaments etched across the travel lines of their wearied foreheads. So we sit and write those words on black sands that stretch from then to now, from now to infinity. Can you read those words? Can you feel those words? Those words rise high. Those words breathe life. Those words are yours. Those words are mine. Their spirit speaks to us in that space and time where our ancestors dine. Can you hear them? Can you feel them? Tonight, I encourage you to continue to let your voices be heard. Vote. I extend sincere gratitude to our keynote speaker, Congresswoman Alma S, to tonight's organizers, participants, other guest speakers, performers, and everyone who played a role in this event taking place. Once again, welcome. I hope you enjoyed tonight's program. Thank you, and may God bless you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Morgan. Okay, hands in the air, show some love for her. She had some power behind those words. And we will keep this movement of power moving forward with our keynote speaker. So now you can't talk about civic activity and civic duty and engagement and women without talking to one of the key figures here on the political landscape, not only in North Carolina, but in this nation. I know a lot of you have heard of Dr. Alma S. You've heard about her hats, and I know you've heard about her great work representing the 12th Congressional District of North Carolina. But my question is, do you really know her? Well, tonight at Engage Her, we'll give you a chance to actually know Dr. Adams and know her story. Ladies and gentlemen, Dr. the godmother of HBCUs, show some love for Congresswoman Alma S.
Thank you, Cheryl. It's good to be here, and I do want to thank JCSU and to the library and all of the partners for allowing me to participate with you tonight. I'm kind of like, my story is pretty typical, probably like many of yours, one of modest beginnings, like many of our ancestors. I was born more than 7 decades ago in High Point, North Carolina. Never lived in North Carolina as a child growing up. My mom said we moved up north when I was around 8 weeks old. Record has it that my parents married young as teens and separated when my mother was actually 8 months pregnant with me. So I actually never met my dad until I was 15 years old. And that's another story for another time. And perhaps once I leave Congress and finish all of my work out here, I'll write my book and I'll include all that in there. I was the third child of my parents. They referred to me as the knee baby. I was around 2 years old, I guess, when my mom remarried. And of course, she and my stepfather had one son, Ben, and he and I are the only remaining siblings. I had an older brother and an older sister from my mother and father, and our stepdad passed away when I was young as well. So as I look back over my years, I have fond memories growing up in cities that I lived in: Baltimore, Maryland, Montclair, New Jersey, and of course, Newark, New Jersey, where I spent a lot of time and graduated from high school there before leaving to go to college in Greensboro, North Carolina. So I've been in North Carolina now, living as a resident since the mid 60s, and heard a lot about what was going on here. And this is where I wanted to go to school. So I was educated here in North Carolina at North Carolina A&T State University, and then taught for 40 years at Bennett College in Greensboro. So, not having much growing up, I certainly not only appreciate the people I represent, but the office that I have. And never did I imagine that a poor Black girl growing up in the ghetto of Newark, New Jersey, walking those streets, now able to walk the halls of Congress.
And we love that. That's a great motivational story. And then you have affected so many people with your work. Now, a lot of your work has been focused on the 4 H's: healthcare, hunger, education, and particularly higher education. Can you tell us a little bit about why those topics have been important to you, Dr. Adams?
Well, let me just say, Cheryl, it's awfully good to see you again, my sister. You don't have your hat on, but you still.
I started to put it on, Dr. Adams.
It's okay. But I didn't have a lot growing up. Listen, and this is a story that I don't mind telling. I wore hand-me-down clothes until I was about 14 years old when I was able to buy my own. I got my first job with a seamstress in Montclair, New Jersey. I was 13 years old when I started to work. My mom did domestic work. She cleaned other folks' houses so I could get an education, and she didn't get an opportunity to do that. But I was one of the healthiest of my mother's children. I had a sister who was 2 years older, who had passed away probably two weeks before her 27th birthday of sickle cell. So I was one of the healthiest of my mother's children. So I did a lot of work around the house, taking on responsibilities for cooking and cleaning and shopping for the family because my mother worked. And I learned those lessons early on about taking responsibility for others and doing real hard work and caring about other people. And so healthcare is something that we didn't have. My sister, I remember getting up in the middle of the night, sometimes 2 and 3 o'clock in the morning, going with my mom to the emergency room because that's where we got our health care. We didn't have health care. So I have those memories, and this is one of the reasons why I've taken healthcare as a personal issue, because we didn't have it. And so many people live without it today. We have hunger and food insecurity in this district a lot, and throughout our state and our country now, particularly since COVID has come into being. So of course, education and higher education, being in higher education as long as I have been, and wanting to get an education. So I focus a lot on that. I chair the, I sit on higher education on the Education and Labor Committee, and I chair on the labor side. So this issue about decent wages, living wages would be something also that's very, very, very important to me. Healthcare again is just tremendously important, particularly now. So We are, we're going to keep on with the 4-H's. They're very important, not only to my district, but to the people across this country.
Well, Dr. Adams, as you talk about your mother, of course, we all think about our own mothers, and it sounds like she instilled something in you that made higher education important. Can we hear more about that in your journey to college?
Well, let me tell you, I had a lot of strong family members. My mother, there were 7 of them, and they're all deceased now. My mom was the youngest. And one of the things in the communities that I grew up in, they would tell us as African American kids, you're going to college. Now, I never figured that out growing up because we didn't really have any money. But my mother knew that because she was not able to get an education, she knew that that would be my pathway. She was a strong, independent woman. She taught me to be that way too. She always said what she meant what she said. I learned to clean myself because, my mother did that for a living, and we didn't have much money, but she was determined. And I had aunts and uncles who helped me. My mother was a strong-willed woman. She was a woman of faith. For the past 38 years, the last 38 years of her life, she pastored in High Point, North Carolina. But she would always tell me growing up, she passed away at age 90 in 2015. But she saw me sworn into Congress and all of the elected offices that I had. But she would always tell me, even, I'd complain about things and so forth. And she would tell me, Alma, I don't care what it looks like. I believe God. So she wanted for her children what she wasn't able to get herself, a good education. She believed in that old Negro spiritual that we used to sing, the Lord will make a way somehow. Indeed, he has made a way for me. But my mother didn't have the privileges of getting that education. She didn't finish high school. She never went to an HBCU or any CU for that matter. But she was still very smart. And she knew that education would be my pathway. And certainly it has been. And I just certainly praise God for her and for the impact that she had on my life.
And Dr. Adams, we praise God for her too, because she did a good job. She raised you up, and you have helped raise so many of us. So let me ask you this. It's one thing to be inspired at home by the family around you, but I want to ask you about other strong, diverse women and how do you go from being at the house to getting into public service? Because that is taking on a huge task, especially these days.
Well, first of all, I never really thought about running for office. I tell you, I think people do that because they have a passion to make a difference, to change something. And after I graduated from high school in New Jersey, and I wasn't really fully prepared to do college work. I took 2 remedial courses at North Carolina A&T. They made a committed investment in me. They took this poor Black girl from the ghetto of Newark, New Jersey, and they molded and shaped me into what they knew I could become. I had to work full and part-time much of the time while I was in school. I married young, like my parents did, but I stayed married to Billy Adams for 14 years. We had 2 wonderful children who are adults now, and they have children of their own. My daughter is a principal in Greensboro. My son works with autistic children. But I was able to finish my degrees, both degrees at North Carolina A&T. And, once you get into school, I always thought college was just 4 years. I never thought more about that. I'd go 4 years, I could get out and do everything I wanted to do. But there's something infectious about education. And once I got in and got with the professors and clearly had professors that looked like me, I didn't have much of that growing up in New Jersey. But I was able to finish A&T with a master's, and I went on to get my Ph.D. from the Ohio State University. And I always like to tell people it was only because of the North Carolina A&T and HBCU. So that's where my interest in advocacy, I guess, came for HBCUs, and it's really underpinned by my personal experience as an HBC student. I was fortunate to have a rewarding career for 40 years teaching and some administrative work at Bennett College. I'm a practicing artist still today, and have a gallery in Greensboro. In January, we'll be 30 years old, the African American Atelier. So all of those things, I think, helped me to mold not only my career, but my interest in actually trying to make a difference in the world and in my community.
So Dr. Adams, how did you decide which office to run for? I mean, there's so many choices out there. How did you pick a position?
Well, listen, I've gone from school board to Congress, and I gave a speech about that one time. I started in the 80s, okay? I did that after finishing my work at The Ohio State University. I came back to Greensboro, and my kids were young, and I put them back in school there. And they were closing schools in Greensboro, and most of the schools that were closing at that time were in the African American community. And my daughter's school was one that was slated, and I was really concerned about that. And so I ran for school board, and after the school and lost my reelection. You know, I lost that reelection because I was focused on trying to improve the conditions for African American children. I didn't apologize for that. But I'll tell you one thing, as an African American woman, speaking out, having been a professor at the college, and I was still teaching. So I was teaching throughout all of my public service until I actually came to Congress. So my HBCU there at Bennett really encouraged faculty and staff and students to be engaged and involved in the community. So I ran for school board, and I lost when I ran again because, you know, they said that Alma Adams, the militant Black professor at Bennett College, that's how the newspaper would begin their conversations about me, because I was an outspoken parent. I was an angry parent when I started out because of what was going on with these children. And so today, I guess I'm an angry grandparent. But what I did, I was still teaching at the college, and after the school board, a position opened on the Greensboro City Council. My community was still upset because I lost that election, not because I didn't get support from the community, but because the system was flawed. They fixed it now, and only people can vote for you who live in your district. It wasn't that way before. And even though I won every precinct in my district, I lost the re-election. I ran for city council, served for 9 years on the Greensboro City Council, and then went to the North Carolina House, where I served for 20 and a half years there, still teaching at the college, didn't miss a class. And then in 2012, I retired from teaching. 2013, I resigned from the North Carolina House, and I ran for the US Congress. So it's been a journey for me, as I said, from school board to Congress, but the Lord has blessed me all the way. And, you know, I'm a proud Black woman who believes in my heritage. I've been enriched and inspired by so many great men and women, like my mother, like my aunts, and even my daughter today, who my mom lived till she was 90. But so I think it's really important that we know our history and all the great women of the civil rights era, elected leaders, artists, writers, all those things, people impacted my thinking and the actions that I've taken throughout my lifetime. Think about Fannie Lou Hamer, Rosa Parks, Shirley Chisholm. All of these women were mentors. And so I believe that a woman's place is in every house, from your house to the courthouse, to the North Carolina House, to even the White House.
We definitely want to see that. Well, Dr. Adams, you have so many laurels that you could have rested on, but you have never stopped the fight. And as part of Engage Her 2020, one of the things that we're saying is that we are looking back to move forward. So I want to ask you, why is it important, and I think even more important than ever, to have more women in political leadership?
Well, let me tell you, I always think about Margaret Thatcher, who said in politics, if you want something said, you ask a man. But if you want something done, you ask a woman. We've been doers all of our lives. We've taken care of our homes. We've taken care of our churches. We have undergirded so much in our communities. And so that quote tends to kind of help me focus on the reality of what I've always known, that we're forced to work a lot harder to get ahead in our society. I mean, I was just watching tonight on CNN as they were talking about all of the outlash about our vice president nominee, the appointee by the presidential nominee on the Democratic side. And so I think people are going to continue to be critical. But the truth is that we are masters of learning how to be effective and doing so many things. We have that skill set. And so it seems to me that we should be engaged, because I tell you, when women run, women win. And so it's important to have us at the table, because we understand, all issues are women's issues. All issues are our issues. So when people tell you, well, you shouldn't be on finance, or you look, we've got a Black woman right now, Maxine Waters, Congresswoman Maxine Waters, who chairs the Finance Committee in the Congress, the first woman to do so. So when you go into the finance room and you see all of these photographs hanging around the wall of these white men, you're going to see a Black woman when she leaves, and her picture will be there. But anyway, I think we have to understand, as women in particular, that all of these issues are about us. Whether we're talking about healthcare, whether we're talking about finance, I mean, we're the ones who manage the money in the home. You ask any guy, they'll tell you, oh, my wife handles this. So I think it's important, topics like paid family leave, women's health. I raised the issue in North Carolina as a representative of the House District to raise the minimum wage. You can't survive on $7.25, but 16 years ago, 16 years ago, I was able to get a bill passed that I worked on for 10 years in the North Carolina House to raise the minimum wage. And we have a bill at the federal level now, and I chair the committee where that bill is going to come through. And so we'll pay family leave, women's health, childcare, all of those things. So these are all these issues that we're concerned about, and they require the kind of sensitivity sometimes that men may not be accustomed to. And I think back to several bills that we had in the North Carolina House, and we couldn't get the men to move along. So what we did, we called their wives to have a conversation with them. So we're convincing. But throughout my career, I remember that I've come across a lot of bills where in some of the statutes, it's got he, him, and his when we were referring to individuals, and we've changed a number of those things. So it's always been kind of, I think, designated when we think about politics for men, which is why I don't wear my hat on the floor of the House. That's another story for another time. But, I've been told that even in the state legislature, we didn't always have bathrooms for women, and even in the halls of Congress. So, things are changing. They didn't expect us to be there, but right now, and we've got a lot more women coming this time too, who are really doing really excellent jobs in terms of their races. But we've got to be at the table. If we're not at the table and a part of the discussion, as you've heard, we'll be on the menu. But, I think about Shirley Chisholm, who said, if there's no table, no seat at the table for you, bring in a folding chair. So I think we've got to remember to do that and have the confidence, because as Speaker Pelosi has said over and over again, when women run, women win.
So, and on that note, we are streaming live on the Charlotte Mecklenburg Library's Facebook page and their YouTube page. And we have a question from Facebook. And Dr. Adams, they want to know, are you hopeful for November 3rd?
I am absolutely, positively hopeful. And I've been praying about it. I've been out here working hard with the community to make sure that we get out and vote. And I want to particularly say to the young people, you are the ones who are going to make a difference. But overall, it's going to be the women who are going to take this thing over the top. And I am hopeful. And I'll tell you, we cannot We don't want to sit back because you see numbers and because you see polls. Don't be fooled by those things. Hopefully, the polls that I've seen are correct, but they may not be. So make sure that not only you do your part and that you go vote, you have a plan for other people in your family and other friends and so forth that you have. It is so important that we vote. When you listen, somebody's going to make a decision for and about you, most times without you. So you got to do one or two things. You can do what I've done, and many folks like me, and run for office and work from the inside out. Or you should be able to control those of us, including Alma Adams, who make decisions on your behalf. You cannot do that if you don't vote.
And that is very, very true. Now, as a woman, and you're in a lot of places where you don't see a lot of women and you don't see a lot of Black women, well, any women of color. So how do you navigate that? Because I think right now, someone might be listening, one of these JCSU students who might say, I want to be like Dr. Adams. But Dr. Adams, tell us, how do we develop that thick skin as a woman and take that step forward?
First of all, I always like to say, you can be what you see. And so if you continue to look out there, you'll see a lot of folks who look like you. Now, people can have low expectations of women in leadership positions, but and they can also carry a great deal of prejudice. And again, I heard that this evening. And it's more, I think it becomes more difficult when you are a woman of color. Of course, if you look back historically, we've had that kind of history. But I think you just have to be passionate about what, first of all, know who you are. Don't stand in your own way. It was Emerson who said that most of the shadows in one's lifetime come from standing in one's own sunshine. So we have an obligation, ladies, to get out of our own way, to not stand in our own sunshine. And we should never allow anybody else to block our view. And that's all about having confidence in who you are. And I think if we just want to encourage, we have a youth program at the Atelier, and it's about helping young people understand art and engage in artistic encounters. But it's more about helping to develop that self-esteem. And that's really, believe in who you are. Don't let anybody tell you who you are. It's not what they call you. It's what you answer to. And so you answer to what and who you know you want to be called. Now, listen, I told you earlier, they didn't label me as a concerned parent, even though I was, but it was because I was Black. I was a militant Black parent, but a parent who didn't look like me, white parents, they're concerned. So, but we know we're concerned too. But anyway, that's the long-standing reality, I think, that Black women and women of color more broadly face and are labeled. But listen, believe in who you are, and have respect for who you are, because people won't respect you if you don't, first of all, respect yourself.
And we know that is true. Now, the days are slipping by. Tuesday is the big day, Dr. Adams.
It is.
It is the big day. And why is this election so important, so critical to so many people? We got to put some fire into folks. Let us know why to get out there.
Well, I think people have to understand, and not just who's on this ballot, but what's on this ballot. I've heard the president say, what do you have to lose? Well, let me just tell you, healthcare is on this ballot. Your education is on this ballot. Democracy is on this ballot. Your the voting rights. You heard the piece that came on earlier. Black women didn't get the right to vote until 1965. 65. I was a sophomore at A&T in 1965. Now, so when I was coming up, my mother couldn't vote. She wasn't able to vote until I went to college. How about that? So we've got to remember that we don't want to lose our right to participate. And that's the only way you can not only make a difference, but that you can have a say. The truth is that many of us weren't supposed to have a voice or say in this country, let alone a vote, let alone a vote. But of course, centuries of women, people of color, and members of many marginalized communities decided that correcting this was something worth fighting for. And even if you look at history, even dying for. You know, it took 100 years from our nation's founding for Black women to win the right to vote. And as has been said, the 19th Amendment was the only start for Black Americans. So when we think about Rosa Parks and Sojourner Truth and all those folks who actually stood up for our rights, I mean, that's one of the reasons. So many people died so that you could have this right to vote. You cannot say, the young people out there, if you're in college or if you're just working or whatever, that you don't have the right. You have the right to vote right now, a right that many of us didn't have until like I said, 1965. So because of this struggle that we've had over these years, voting is really not just a right now, and a privilege, but it's more importantly a duty. It's a constitutional right that we have. And so I believe that it's our duty to lift our voices and to vote. Because listen, if good people don't go to the polls to vote for good people, then bad people get elected, and bad people do awfully bad things to good people. Look around for the past 4 years. You know what I'm talking about. So we're in a situation here in North Carolina. We are in a battleground. They call this a battleground state. And yes, we're in battle. And so we've got to remember that we have a responsibility because we are in battle. One of the political science professors in my district said that you can call North Carolina a battleground state or a swing state or a purple state, but just call it competitive and critical. So particularly Black women, I want you to know you're going to play a significant role in this election. And because many accomplished Black women are going to be on this ballot. 3 Black women are major party candidates for Congress in North Carolina. That's a historic first. I am the only African-American woman to represent North Carolina in Congress. There's only been 2 earlier, Eva Clayton, who represented District 1, which is in the eastern part of the state, and myself. So it's important. COVID-19 has taken so many lives, so many even in our communities. And so 1 in 1,000 Black Americans have died from COVID-19. If things stay as they are, that'll become 1 in 500. Now I think you have to ask the question, everybody who's listening, do you want things to stay as they are? And if you don't, I know that you don't. You can't possibly want things to stay as they are. And so our very lives are on this ballot, and we're running out of time. You know, there's an old spiritual that we sing in the Baptist church, time is winding up. And indeed it is. So everything that you care about is on this ballot. If you have health care, if you're under 26 right now with the Affordable Care Act, you can stay on your parents' health care until you're 26. There's so many things that will impact your lives for many, many years. We have to think about, Chirl, when you elect people to positions, what authority are you giving them? For example, a president can put people on the highest court and they don't have like 2 years like I have when I run, or 4 years or 6 years if you run. You got a lifetime to be there. So you've got a lifetime to either do right or do wrong. And all of that, again, is going to impact us for decades to come. And so this is so, so critical. You've heard people say, this is the most consequential election of our time. Indeed it is. And it is a matter of life and death.
And Dr. Adams, we thank you so much for your encouraging words, your powerful words. If you are fired to go vote before you should be now, we just want to say, keep up the great work and thank you. And if people want to reach you, what's the best way to reach an elected official?
Well, first of all, we all have phone numbers and emails, and we should have websites, adams.house.gov. is the way to reach me, or you can call our office here in Charlotte, which is 704-344-9950, or you can reach out to Washington, D.C. at 202-225-1510. That's the best way to reach us. And we keep a tally on how many calls and so forth. So if there are issues that you're concerned about, always call your elected officials, because we record that information. And listen, there have been 72 attempts to disband the Affordable Care Act. So it means we don't have any health care. And I think the last attempt, I received about 600 calls one day in my office. You can't ignore that. People saying, don't let this happen. So there's a way to get to your elected officials. And I would say, and you can write them, tweet it. If you go on the website, put their name in and go and get their website, then you can send us an email. And I would say call, email, tweet, text, whatever it is you do. You all have all of this social media and ways in which to reach out. So please do that. And, it's just been a real, it's always good to see you, my sister.
And it's always good to see you, Dr. Adams. Thank you again for being here tonight, part of Engage Her 2020. I just want to say, if you're just getting on, you can still follow us on the Charlotte Mecklenburg Library Facebook page, as well as their YouTube stream. And I can tell you that Dr. Adams will follow up on a phone call or an email. And once again, thank you for your service. And thank you for being here this evening.
Thank you so much, Chirl Girl. All right. Goodbye, everybody.
Round of applause for Dr. Adams. She was dropping those knowledge bombs on us, wasn't she? Okay, people, we gotta get started. And you know what? Since Dr. Adams has her background in art, I think that's part of why we've incorporated so much art and poetry and different things into this evening. So we have something special coming up. It's called The Sounds of the Movement. Now, with my background in radio and media, I can tell you two things that engage people. You only have to even be able to speak the same language. That's sports and it's music. And tonight we have something special for you. It's called Sounds of the Movement. So it's a special video, and it was produced by Sabrina Robinson, who is with the Charlotte Mecklenburg Library Engage 2020 team. And the music you hear, the lyrics were provided by Tiffany Too Cool. So I encourage you to listen and jam with us for a moment.
I watched the sun come up this morning cause I was so mad. But somebody's mother is mourning cause her son didn't come back. How different is that? Still screaming that it's lit to be black while under attack. See, the system done had more twisted than backwards. Blackity, blackity, black. Massa is back in his bag. He packed him a ratchet and flag and traded his hood for a badge. Chasing the hood cause we black. Conditions is badder than bad. Condition to move to the back. Permission to shoot if he's black. Buffoonery, coonery, who do we think we fooling with that? Luckily, Chucky ain't in the mood to be black, cause it's the knee in my back and I love to take a stab at that. Or have a HBCU drumline for the rat-a-tat-tat-tat. You mad cause I'm black? Me, I'm just mad and black, just mad and black, just mad and black, just mad and black. Sign up right here if you wanna go to Mars when the ship come. I need a sign. Picking signs in the air if you're tired of being marginalized. I need a sign. Peace signs like a flare and a prayer for God to protect when the police come. Can I get a sign? Is this a sign or a dare? Never be scared, that's freedom. It's let it be black, it's let it be black, it's let it be blackity, blackity, black. It's let it be black, it's let it be black, it's let it be blackity, blackity, black. It's let it be black, it's let it be black, it's let it be blackity, blackity, black. It's let it be black, it's let it be black, it's let it be blackity, blackity, black.
asking no more. We demand it.
We are bettering our communities because we are the community. Our government, our officials are in place because we put them there. And we will continue to take them out if they do not better our communities.
This is the truth. As a people, we must understand that we can come out here every single day. But if we don't have an agenda, and if we ain't dropping names, and we're not going to those polls, then everything that we're doing right now is for naught, and I refuse for that to happen.
I am my ancestors' worst nightmare and wildest imagination. I am strange fruits of the spirit and Fruitvale Station. I am millennial, my mind chemicals dance like centennial celebrations. It's in my nature to think greater than my oppressive situation. Still descendant, yet independent, a genetic mutation. Sent to tell the story of my own emancipation. You work for me. You work for me. Me and my people, we demand equal. All we see is evil, but you work for me. I've been having symptoms given by the system, and that's supposed to work for me. Vaccinate the system. I know they the sick ones. Yeah, that works for me. They want me to cast my vote. They say hold fast to hope. Then they go and blast my scope. Cause you can't reach what you can't see. They want me to cast my vote. They say hold fast to hope. Then they go and blast my scope. Cause you can't reach what you can't see. You gon' have to dig deep. God bless the streets. Never trust a human that don't practice what they preach. You a beast. Life is a beach. Keep God first and the ops on the leash. All we want is peace. Please give me a piece, but don't pull out your piece and make me rest in peace. We tired of saying please. Politicians, the opposition, cops is villains. Stop pretending the option's slimming. Everybody's in competition. Ashes, ashes, and black heroes is dropping with them. Can we stop this rhythm? Shouldn't be this hard to put cops in prison. All we need is love, but your heart's in rock position. Toxic conditions, thoughts are conditioned to see darkness and get awkward feelings. How am I supposed to deal with this when COVID still exists? Looking for government loopholes while cops just shoot holes in innocence. Inadequate stimulus and unemployment benefit, asking the Lord for deliverance. Can't ignore the ignorance. Facts. And that's exactly right, and that's exactly why Judgment Day has come to judge them. Tell your loved ones that you love them and would love to see more of them. All they have to do is turn from sin and learn to love them. Put no one below, above him, and wear a mask. That's all I ask.
Yes, I am loving that. That was the sounds of the movement, produced by Sabrina Robinson from Charlotte Mecklenburg Library, with lyrics and musical score by Tiffany, Too Cool Tiff Davis. I love it. Okay, in case you are joining us and you don't know what's going on, this is in the Engage Her program, the JCSU edition, and you can see It is lit to be blackity black. We're having a good time up in here. That was amazing. And if you didn't see everything tonight, you will be able to stream it tomorrow on their website. So if you missed a part of it, you can always catch up tomorrow. Now we get to the panel section of our evening's program, and this is where it gets hot, it gets deep. We want to recognize those voices, the diverse voices of women who we haven't heard nearly enough from. And now is your chance to get involved and ask questions. So if you have a question, you can always put it on Facebook, or you can go to YouTube and put it in our chat room. It's my pleasure to introduce our moderator. She is the Director of Library Sciences and Curation at Johnson C. Smith University. She has served as a history maker on the History Maker Advisory Board and Planning Advisory Team for Harvard Radcliffe Workshop on Technology and Archival Processing. She is the current board chair for HBCU Library Alliance, and she's also an author. She wrote the book, Organizing and Preserving Family and Religious Records, a Step-by-Step Guide. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Miss Monica Rue.
2020 launched the 100th anniversary of the 19th Amendment that gave women the right to vote. Women all over the United States joined in to celebrate the struggle. However, the struggle for Black women is far different than what history tells us. You see, from 1870 to 1920, the women's movement remained largely segregated. White women leaders dismissed the concerns of Black women, such as rape, lynching, and servitude, as racial issues and not a feminine issue. How could Black women stay at home and have husbands support them with the conditions of their lives required that they contribute to the family income? How could they maintain the submissiveness and sexual purity demanded of the true woman when white men could rape Black women at will? How could Black women take part in a white women's movement when they had to devote their efforts to providing that Black men and Black women were as civilized as white? To take action on their behalf, Black women formed the national associations of their own, like the National Association of Colored Women, National Council of Negro Women, in which they worked to gain for themselves the respect, safety, and physical freedom that society routinely accorded white middle-class women. Tonight, we will hear from diverse women who are still organizing for social justice, women's rights, and voters' rights. Let's welcome our panel speakers. Dr. Tekla Johnson, Africana historian. Quenisha Payne, social justice and political engagement advocate for student voters. Laura Salinas from Mexico, migrated to York, South Carolina. And Clara Tadu, founder and organizer of Kids Fed Up, a youth-led activist group. We will start this conversation by having our panel share with our viewers a little bit about themselves. We'll start with Dr. Tekla Johnson.
Well, good evening. I think Dr. Alma Adams, representative, said it all, but we'll try to add some things. So enjoyed the poetry from Director Sabrina. My name is Dr. Tekla Ali Johnson, and I was asked the question when I first heard about the women's right to vote, or when I first ever, and this really got me thinking. And I remember that when I was about 4 or 5 years old, my mother had taken my sisters and I out canvassing for Shirley Chisholm. It was my first political act ever. I didn't know exactly what we were doing. I had mentioned that, we had gone, I was probably 3 or 4 years old. We had gone caroling, and I thought, well, this is like going caroling, except we were passing out a picture of a Black woman everywhere that we went. And of course, after a while, we began to hear, our mother explain, as we went, what to the neighbors and what the objective was, and the other neighborhood women who were with her. And so we began to get the idea that what was at stake was women's voices and women's needs being met.
Thank you. Thank you. So we'll go to our next panelist, Laura Salinas.
Hi, good evening. So I'm a recent graduate of Johnson C. Smith University. I was a political science major, and now I'm a DACA advocate. I have DACA myself, and I'm here to encourage other Smith students and youth to go out and vote.
Thank you. Quenisha Payne.
Hello, everyone. My name is Quenisha Payne. I am from Greensboro, North Carolina, also a recent graduate of Johnson C. Smith University. And my experience during the time, basically, I just advocated for students' rights, students' voting rights, and reproductive justice while on campus.
Thank you. And Clara Tandu. I hope I'm saying your last name correctly.
Yeah, my name's Claire Tando. And I run Kids Fed Up, which is a student-led organization, basically to get youth of color and student activists involved beyond service level regarding activism and organizing.
Great. So my background is a storyteller, so I like for everyone to share stories about their experience. And I think Dr. Tekla Johnson kind of started us off, but I want everyone to answer the question and talk a little bit about growing up. Did women in your family speak about the suffrage movement or women's rights movements or women activism? And if so, how did the conversation start? We'll start with Clara.
Yeah, so for me, my mom always made sure to tell me that I had to be independent, making sure that I have all my stuff together. And usually we would always try to find people on TV that, you know, represented me or looked like me and would show that this could be you one day. So that was as far as mine was, only because growing up, there wasn't as much representation as there is now or there's trying to be. But I always kept in the back of my head that, you know, anything I put my mind to, I can do it. Whether there's somebody in that position that looks like me or not, you know, one day it could be. So yeah, that has been my experience.
Great. Thank you for sharing that. Quenisha, what about you?
For me, I actually want to say the conversation started back when I was in high school. So starting, you know, early enough prior to actually being able to vote and actually learning about kids voting. I don't know if you all remember that, but I actually was like the class representative during the time in high school. And actually I was able to learn more about it and talk to other students about it during the time. And more specifically in my own household, it was more rather during church and talking to the ladies during service, after service, about women locally in politics that were involved, and just with them and connecting with them more so locally during the time.
Great. Thank you. What about you, Laura?
So actually for me, the conversation was just never brought up. It wasn't until the 2008 election that I found out that my family or me, we weren't able to vote because of our citizenship. So it was kind of difficult because I saw like my friends would tell me like, hey, are your parents voting? Who are your parents voting for? And then it was kind of awkward because obviously we weren't able to.
Wow. It just shows time we take those opportunities and privilege for granted. Just like our Congresswoman was saying, you know, it's very important to remember we have the opportunity to participate, and some do, some don't. So thank you for sharing. So let's move on to the second question. When was the first time you learned about women's right to vote? Dr. Johnson, you want to lead us in the discussion?
Sure. We grew up in a community center. I don't know if they really have community centers anymore, but we grew up in community centers. That's how it used to be when you still had a segregated community. And so we were taught there just like you would be taught in school. So they, be after school, but they would be teaching you. So we learned about that African-American women had to have not only the 15th Amendment, the 19th Amendment, but the Voting Rights Act of 1965 that Representative Adams was talking about before we could vote. We learned about, how the movement started with white women, Elizabeth Cady Stanton, and, joining Frederick Douglass in the abolitionist movement, and then being denied entry into the, a world anti-slavery convention, and this saying we're going to start our own movement. But African-American women were already working and fighting like Sojourner Truth at the same time. So Sojourner Truth would go into those movements, and these things, as they showed us these pictures, and, a little back then we had I don't think they have film strips anymore, but, it would make us so happy because we wouldn't hear anything in school. I mean, nothing in school about Black people, nothing. Unless it would show a picture of a person who was enslaved, there was nothing. And so it made you really happy. And then with just listening to my mother with personal experiences, just talking about women and men, she would say that even though she had, as much education as a man, or whatever the case would be, he would be put over her over and over again. So racism. So I guess I would say that the first time I ever heard about the intersectionality of oppression, race, and sex being the special oppression, if I can use the word special, of women of color, that it's more than just gender oppression, that it's both racial and gender, that intersectionality, that women contended with it then and we contend with it now.
Wow, thank you. That was very powerful. Clara, what about you?
So the first time I heard about it was in grade school. So I want to say maybe third grade. We were having, of course, the civics and whatnot, election speaking. And I didn't really understand the amendments and whatnot, being so young at the time, but it really clicked to me that we did not have the same rights as some of my students in the class. And that's when I, changed my whole perspective on society, really, about how long things take for certain individuals in our society, and how whitewashed sometimes our history can be. And not sometimes, but, most of the time. But yeah, that was my first experience.
Thank you. Yeah, what about you?
So I went to a predominantly white school district. I think they brought up the topic in middle school. And it was kind of in 1965, women earned the right to vote, and that was it. They didn't clarify what it meant for women of color, or the significance, or why it even mattered.
Yeah. Anisha, what about you?
Definitely for me, the same as well growing up, learning about it during school. And honestly, it was more like a quick breeze on the unit. Literally, we spent 1 week talking about the material, and the next week we talked about something else. And they really didn't go in depth with learning about the women's suffrage movement back then. And I honestly want to say I didn't understand in depth what it meant until I got to college.
Wow, thank you for sharing it. Let's move on to the next question and think about it in terms of your current work. Did these conversations with women in your life inspire the work you do today? Clara, you want to take us off?
So most of the conversations I have to deal with something that Congresswoman Adams had brought up. Usually Shirley Chisholm said that you have to bring a folding chair to the table. And most of the work that I've done now says that we are bringing the table. We are bringing everything and more, because we are not to just expect that we are, less than already. And so these conversations have just led me to think of what's next in my future, a bigger picture, and not just settling for anything that I could slide by on surface level. And so for me personally, I see my future is very bright. And many of my goals is what my mom may not have been able to do, my grandmother wasn't able to do, but I can do for myself and my future, for my future kids as well. So I would say that they definitely have inspired the work I do today.
And can you talk a little about the work you do? Can you tell us a little bit about Kids Fed Up?
Yeah, so Kids Fed Up really started because I was a part of another student-led progressive organization, but it wasn't as progressive as it claimed to be. It left out youth of color a lot. And we didn't really get a chance to say much or give input on current events or anything going on. As well as a lot of things would end, the activism would end at phone banking or canvassing, and it would never really go in depth of, how we can actually help our communities. One key word is civic engagement. And that basically just means how we can honestly bring our community together, having everybody understand like what they can do to help and progress the community. And so I wanted to start Kids Fed Up to start educating students on this, especially youth of color, because we deserve to be in these spaces, but there's no opportunities or people around that are actively helping to do that. And even if there are, they don't know where to look. And that's basically where Kids Fed Up started, because I really wanted to have a safe space or make a space where youth of color and student activists can look into organizing and activism on a deeper level.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing that. Very good. Laura, what about you?
So I'm an immigrant, I'm brown, and I'm a woman. So like I have everything, all the odds against me. And I honestly didn't hear about women advocacy or, women who are fighting for our rights until college, when I met so many strong Black women who taught me everything I know now. And I think it's because of them and because of their efforts that I now try to go back to my community and talk to girls in our high schools who are still, don't know about all these things that do affect them, whether they know it or not.
Mm-hmm. Great. Dr. Johnson?
I would say that my experiences have been similar to Laura Salinas and Claire Tandu. And Kanisha, I didn't get your last name, but all of you, it seemed like everybody was saying the same thing, that there's these huge areas of omission that we are like, invisible in, or we can be there, but there's no input. It's a one-way thing. And so you have to take, as you guys did with Kids Fed Up, take the power or take your power and actually build something different, because within that framework, it's not working. And for me, I was a history student and wanted to be a teacher. And I was reading things like The History of Women's Suffrage by Susan B. Anthony, and I told you, they told us about them, Elizabeth Cady Stanton. And I noticed that there were people that were missing. So who was missing? People like Mary Ann Shadd Carey, first African-American publicist in this country ever, and also a women's suffrage advocate, and also a advocate for suffrage for Black men in the 15th Amendment, completely out. Josephine Ruffin, completely out of the Colored Women's Clubs, who did so much political work in front of the scene and behind the scene to organize Black women. So just all of this stuff that had gone on that wasn't included. And here in North Carolina, actually nationally as well, Charlotte Fort and Grimke I'm thinking of, but also Ruffin and the National Association of Colored Women's Clubs, which Monica Rue mentioned at the beginning of the hour. So the whole lifting as we climb message, there's like generations of us that didn't get it, not because it wasn't happening, not because sisters weren't reaching out, just like they're reaching out to you when you got to college, but you had to get to college to get it, and a lot of us don't make that jump because we're already pushed out or whatever by that time.
Wow, you said something very powerful about, not having the opportunity and not being exposed to, even hearing about some of our story, which is very important. And we should all be, those of us who had the opportunity to go to college, to be fortunate to do that. So that leads me to Kanisha and her work at Johnson C. Smith, thinking about, student voters. So talk a little bit about that as well, and answering the question as far as what inspired your work.
Yes. Just to start off with what actually inspired me. So I actually want to credit my high school social studies teacher, Ms. Donovan. She is a phenomenal African-American woman who graduated from North Carolina A&T, and she literally dropped amazing gems during her teaching and just showing me like, hey, I see this potential in you and the work that you're going to be able to do once you leave your high school. So I took that literally going into Smith and just learning from other phenomenal women on campus like Dr. T, Dr. Williams, and other amazing professors at JCSU that have motivated me and pushed me to take my passions and put them into action. And just literally taking all of that and just putting it into the work during the time I was there. So to speak more towards actually advocating for students and actually getting them out to vote, the access to being able to vote, whether it was rise to the polls, making sure they had access to free literature and free information that's easily accessible to them whenever it was needed. And also just to add on to other women who have also impacted my work as well, and just connecting outside of campus with other in the community that have actually done work in Charlotte that has also impacted my work while on campus at Smith.
Thank you. Thank you. So we're going to move into the next question, but I'm going to tell you a little story. The place was a tiny Delta town of Maryville, Mississippi. The time, 1964. I was arrested every time I tried to register to vote. Today, we are experiencing a pandemic and a big election year in which voter suppression is showing its ugly face once again. Based on your advocacy work, what would you say to your community, family, friends about the importance of voting? Dr. Johnson.
Well, this is a trick question for me because you know, I'm a historian, and so as a historian, I know that, you know, ironically, you know, women, American women, had to gain political power to get the vote. They didn't get political power through having the vote like white men. They had to gain enough political power. They had to strategize just to get the vote. And I mean, I'm talking about all, you know, women across the board. And having said that, you know, white women, as you mentioned earlier, use different strategies than African American women. Their issues were different. You know, reproductive rights, of course, the franchise, equal pay. Now, African American women have always had those same issues, but also others. Like, how do we intersect these movements? What are our overlapping strategies going to be? You know, what kind of alliances should we have? And what's the? And I heard some talk about that earlier from, I think, Ms. Tandu. What is the limits of these alliances that we can forge with these other groups, you know, and still have our own voice? And so these are problems that we face and struggles that we faced throughout the whole time. And so for me, this election, this might be jumping ahead a little bit, but this election is, as Representative Adams and you also said, is a little different. I mean, typically I'm an independent voter, and I like the third party candidates because they push the issues of wealth redistribution, which I think is at the core of a lot of the inequalities that we have. However, this year, the rhetoric is such that it's calling for a return to pre-civil rights politics, pre-women's movement politics. It's like taking a time clock and just putting the country, just dialing it back, down. So the threat of the situation is that with all the lives lost, as we talked about earlier, all of the sacrifices made, that we are actually under threat of all of those victories that have just been taking us a little bit up the road toward democracy being just for naught. And so it is a crucial moment. It really is a crucial moment.
Thank you for sharing that. Laura.
So I think it's important to vote because those we put in those power positions are the ones who make these decisions for us. For white women, it means certain things, and for Black women, it means another, and for Hispanic women, it means something completely different. So when we put these people in office, we want to make sure they represent all of us, all of our needs, and to ensure that we put people in power that can really represent us.
Phoenicia.
So Dr. Johnson actually said a lot of what I wanted to say, and I agree a lot with what she said also. The importance of voting is very critical, and is a civic duty that many of us should practice and will continue to practice while we are here. I believe that we should take that moment to actually use that time to voice our concerns and our issues with those that we are looking towards voting for. And that also we should take a step further past the booth once the elections are over to make sure we hold our officials accountable so that they are actually listening to us and listening to the concerns that we have.
Very good. Clara?
So immediately seeing that statement, I had to think of Black women and all they've done for the Democratic Party, like as a whole. As of right now, the statistics are saying that we are the holding up the Democratic Party, sorry. And that's a lot to handle. And it makes me think of all that Black women are having to take on, especially I would say for this election cycle, always having the burden of having to stay strong and keep everything together and make sure to get everybody. But there's never anybody for us or on our side, making sure that we're okay, making sure that it is a vulnerable spot for us to share our emotions and whatnot. But voting is definitely important. I just hope that in the future it gets to a point where we don't have to give it to one portion of people in our society to carry that whole burden, or to make sure that they are informing other people of how important it is to vote and educate people.
Wow, thank you for that. Thank you for that. So we're going to move on to the next question. Women's voting is the path to political power and change. What is your reaction to that statement? Phoenicia?
Yes. So my response to that statement is that we have to include women that also do not have that same access as those who are able to vote. We have to also think of the other methods, alternatives, or other approaches to making sure women have access to that political power in order for change to be enacted. So whether she's canvassing her community, knocking door to door, and making sure she's pushing the awareness of voting, making sure folks are registered to vote. We have to also think about those who don't have the access to the ballot box, whether they are pushed back from voting, even as a registered voter. So along with that, I do say that it is a critical way for us to actually reach the political power in order for change to happen, but it's not the only way for it to happen because there are barriers that are preventing women from voting.
Thank you. Thank you. Laura?
So I think that regardless of your party, I think it's every citizen's duty to vote. It sounds repetitive and everyone says go out and vote, but as someone who can't do it, I encourage all of you to make that change, to encourage others, those who can vote for us. Yeah.
Thank you. Clara?
Yeah, I would agree with everything that Laura and Quenisha have both said. Voting, especially this year, I've gained so many different perspectives on people who have, expressed their willingness to vote, how hesitant they've been, why it's been hard to vote for our choices right now. And just as Laura said, given somebody who can't vote, it's definitely changes your mind on the power that you hold and what you can do to change our society. Even though it may be hard, seeing the bigger picture and seeing what it can do for all of us at the end of the day is what makes voting really important.
Thank you. Dr. Jackson?
For me, I knew I was going to get in trouble on one question, and this one is the one, I think, because I just can't help but talk about the sacrifices. I was really pleased when Representative Adams brought it up, but of the many examples of women who knew that it would take political or not just voting, but staying politically organized and staying politically active to not only get the vote, but keep the vote, but also all the other things. I mean, my favorites are, I want to name some names now for the next 3 minutes or 2 minutes, whatever I have, is Ida B. Wells and Alice Paul. One is an African-American woman, one is a white woman. But Ida B. Wells, with her, Southern Horrors, a publication of anti-lynching, her journalism, getting her in trouble with the locals there in Memphis in her day and getting run out of town, her press being burnt down, losing her livelihood, co-founding the NAACP, starting the first African-American women's suffrage organization, and it's called Alpha Suffrage Club. I mean, she just did so much. This is what she just dedicated her life to. And she was able to live and see the passage of the 19th Amendment, but not to see the Voting Rights Act. So she didn't really see African-American women vote. Alice Paul, she did. She's a white woman and she was not typical. She organized these protests, these unpopular protests in front of the White House, was willing to go ahead and get arrested, did it during the wartime, got arrested, got others arrested, held a march against the President Wilson's inauguration. And then here's the dynamic between the two, asked Ida B. Wells, yeah, we want you to come, but we want you to march in the back. And of course, what do you think Ida B. Wells said? No, she's not going to do it. She showed up and she marched, but she marched where she was supposed to march. And so, this is the dynamic that has been going on. And so, but both women had to sacrifice. Alice Paul was put into jail and her force fed, because she was on hunger strike. And so these women were beaten. I mean, when you think when we were showing in school the women's movement, I think it was one of you who said it was like a little blurb. No, these women were not. And even Ida B. Wells showed, no, these women were beaten. These women were ran out of town. These women they sacrificed and they fought, for this right that we have. And so, and even those who did it differently, like Mary Church Terrell, they still gave their life. They gave their life. And so in that way, in terms of working for this cause. So, for me, this is not just one dimension in terms of women of color getting the vote. It is the entire civil rights movement. So Little Rock Nine, Rosa Parks, I mean, all of it contributed, the Voting Rights Act. But before that, so what I'm saying is that it took the entire movement of the people to make it happen. It wasn't just the white women's movement for people of color to get the vote. And so to keep it would make sense that we also have to fight, I guess.
Right. And thank you for pointing to that, your background in Africana history, African American studies, kind of add to the content of why we're having this conversation. And I think Clara said it earlier, thinking about Black women and the power of Black women and how Black women have sacrificed so much and continue to sacrifice so much, uplifting the Democratic Party. And, me being a librarian, of course, I always got to share a book. But the book right here is called The Strong Black Woman in America, Life and Culture, Fierce Angels by Sherry Parks. It's a very good read. And the reason why it's a good read because it's talking about everything that we're saying about Black women, our sacrifice, our mothers, our grandmothers. We talk about, the well-known names, but we don't talk about the local heroes like our mothers, our grandmothers, our sisters, who also had a say into, our rights as women as well. So I just wanted to share that. But as we move on, the story that I first shared with you was talking about Janito Blackwell, who became the first mayor of Maryville, Mississippi in 1964. In that same year, Blackwell, Fannie Lou Haman, and other civil rights campaigners organized with Mississippi in 1964 the Mississippi Freedom Democratic Party, which pushed for electoral fairness, which is a big issue today. Electoral fairness is the key to ensuring that the American people vote is represented and heard by who wins an election in the future. Do you consider this to be the new activism movement for women? Electoral fairness. And I know that's a heavy question, but we're going to start off with Clara.
So I do believe that, well, Well, simply put, I don't think there's any like activism for women. I was taught really early on about like intersectionality, how everything connects in our society. So there's nothing really, nobody should really be like a single issue activist or like a single issue voter type thing. Understandably, like there's so many things that connect within one, like take environmental justice, for instance. If you're going to look into it, you're going to have to look into why majority of Black kids have asthma when there's pollution plants sat right next to the homes. And right next to the homes are the schools, but the schools have bad AC and mold, and it's done on purpose, and nobody can get over there in time to fix all that. So I don't think there's really any new wave. I think that people are just now understanding that these things connect, so they can't just look into one thing and that be the end all be all. So that's what I would say for that.
All right, thank you. Laura.
Yeah, so I agree with Clara. Again, each bill or law that is passed, it means something different for each person. So understanding how right now, youth are more aware of what's going on, but there are other issues that intersect with what we're talking about now, you know?
Good. Dr. Johnson.
I would agree. In fact, that is exactly what I was thinking as well, was that these multiple issues, so that women of color have always dealt with these. And I was thinking about in North Carolina with the Colored Women's Club, Charlotte Hawkins Brown and Anna Julia Cooper from Raleigh, and they were doing, dealing with voting issues, but also with education and food and all of these other things as well. And I think that's been throughout. Ella Baker, and I guess what I liked about what you did was starting one of my colleagues here was starting the Kids Fed Up when this other organization wasn't working, because that's what Ella Baker did. She would switch up. She started out, what was it, first one, North Carolina, Negro Cooperative League, 1930, switched up to the NAACP, switched up again to the Southern Christian Leadership Conference, and switched up again. When none of them met her needs, she formed the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee. So kind of, she's like you, I think, in that if you didn't see the organization that out there that was the vehicle to where to go, she built one. And so I think that is what we have to do. Last thing I wanted to say is that it was all of these women. I was glad you mentioned Mr. Rue, Fannie Lou Hamer. I think it was all of these women together with all of these activities and their men alliances and even white counterpart alliances that, made it possible for Shirley Chisholm. I told you when I was a little girl that I was, on her campaign, didn't really know what it was, but for her to, have been a nominee for president in 1970, she didn't win, but wasn't she maybe a precedent for the election of Barack Obama in some way, or for Kamala Harris maybe in some earlier way, or kind of making a pattern or a part in the waves or something like that. But those are just my thoughts.
Great. Quenisha.
Oh my gosh. I actually want to agree with Clara and Dr. Johnson again, because we have to recognize the women that had came before us, historically speaking, and continue to uplift their work. And I even go back to them and relate it back to my work as well, and recognize them as mothers, as what we would call them in movement work, and just basically amplify their work and use what they have taught us and put it towards our work so it can continue for generations moving forward. So even going back to talking about Fannie Lou Hamer and their phenomenal work as well, and just basically saying that this work has always has been going on, and it will continue to move forward because of women like them, and that we cannot continue to disregard them out in these conversations, because they are critical and important for us to continue to move forward in the work that we are currently doing. And just to talk about electoral fairness, it's nothing new at all. It's always been going on. And as long as we're going to see voter suppression and anti-voter tactics that's going to continue to happen, we're going to continue to put the fire to this work and make sure that this work continues on. So yeah.
Great. What I like about this panel is the diversity, and to hear all everyone answer that question with such passion and conviction. I hear it, and I hope the viewers hear it as well. But more importantly, I see and I hear your advocacy. I see and hear, that you're not just willing to just give up. Historically the content, but you also doing your part in your own way. So before I actually get to the last question, I want you to tell the viewers a little bit more about you, your work, and how do you plan to continue this work and continue to forge ahead with the legacy that you heard about, and the legacy that I hope each and one of you will be making yourselves. So let's start with Laura.
Yeah, so at the moment, I'm helping high school students here in my community back home apply to college, learn right now, those who are able to vote, tell them like where to go, how to register. And then in the future, I hope to obtain my law degree and again, come back to my community, use it in my community and help the minorities and low income population here, specifically Black women, Hispanic women.
Thank you. Clara.
So currently I'm in school right now. So I'm working and bridging my Kids Fed Up with school. So I'm trying to do as much I can do here in regards to if there's a teacher that isn't very culturally aware of, what's going on right now and helping stuff like that. We'd have a Black Lives Matter mural at school, things like that may be performative. For me personally, I was able to speak with the dean and do more action steps, such as getting kids to read in different groups and understanding the basis of murals and what they can do besides just paintings on the street, what they actually mean and things like that. So that's what I've been doing.
Okay, great.
So just to add a little bit more about the work that I have done and will continue to do. So even prior to the 2016 election and just learning about voter suppression, ever since then, I've been passionate about making sure that folks are able to vote and make sure that they have access to the polls. Like I was saying earlier, make sure that the students were able to get to the polls by arranging transportation. And I'm still like that. If I see that organizations around the community need support or if they need any extra help with that, I basically step up and support those organizations and making sure that they are able to get voters to the polls when they need to. Currently, within my own work, I am taking a break from everything that I've done since I was at Smith. But I've shifted my work to doing more of a national volunteer service and supporting my local community more rather through alleviating homelessness and food insecurity. And after that, I do want to get my master's in public health, come back home and continue to support my community at the best as I can.
Great, thank you. Dr. Johnson.
I have my list of voters to call that I got that I got through one of the text things. So I'm going to do that. I continue to work on I work on a group called Jericho that tries to free from prison political activists from former movements from the 60s and 70s, and then also to identify activists who may be in prison for political reasons in the current era. And then also with that goes prison abolition, which I haven't done as much in, but which I want to step in more deeply. And I think that we haven't talked about the felony thing, that how a lot of us are disenfranchised because we have the felony things label. But in my other life, I also do library work, and I try to do things that with with my colleagues that help the community. But in my teaching, I do critical race theory and women's theory. And I think that's an honor to be able to do that. All of that is an honor to be able to do, because I do feel what Kanisha Payne was talking about, standing on, our mothers, I guess they're step stools, if you will. And but the ironic thing that Kanisha said, I was thinking when you said that, you were like, well, we have to recognize them because they're mothers and they're in this work, and we have to amplify their work. But I also thought, yes, and we're guaranteed that it's going to be moving forward because of young women like you guys. So I was like, got a really good feeling in me, like, we're going to win. It's just a matter of time.
Thank you. And I want to put a plug in because I know she wouldn't. She wrote a book called Free Radical, Ernest Chambers, Black Power and the Politics of Race. So this is Dr. Tekla Johnson's book. So check it out. So one more question, and then we'll bring it on home. The most decisive steps the Negro can take is that short walk to the voting booth. Part of King's speech in 1960 when he was arrested during a sit-in in Atlanta, Georgia. What is your reaction to this speech about this upcoming election? And Quenisha.
So my immediate reaction to this was that is very true, but also that it's been harder for us to take that step, and that we are constantly fighting the barriers that's preventing us from taking that step. And that step has been critical and important since the beginning. And I just want to say that we just continue to see how they just push us back each and every time. And we just can't let them continue to push us back each and every time. We have to continue to apply pressure against those who are disenfranchising us, and to continue to create access and accessible ways for people to get to the polls as much as possible. And also that I'm trying to think of the best way to articulate this point. But basically, we can't forget that there's more to do along with that step that we're going to take when voting. So yeah.
All right. Clara?
So for me, I think as far as everybody said, just reiterating past statements, voting is very, very important. And it's nothing really that what I've learned through doing this work is that you have to relate to people, be relatable as possible, and make them believe of why they're voting. And not just, people are like, oh, you have to vote, you have to vote. People have to actually understand the importance of why and why it truly matters to them. And so even though when people are saying we should, hurry to the ballot box and early voting, there's so many obstacles that could be in the way of some people voting sometimes. And I'm glad that, as we move forward right now, we are now understanding that the obstacles and what they take. But yeah, voting is important. So I'm glad we're finally bringing it full circle.
Thank you.
So definitely, like Quenisha said, there's so many obstacles put in our way that it's definitely easier not to vote. But I think because of those obstacles, we need to vote. With putting women of color in power positions, or Black people, Hispanic people, putting these people in office is how we're going to start seeing that change. So I encourage all of you to just go out and vote. Vote for yourself, if not for yourself, for your ancestors, if not for them, for those who can't vote.
Thank you. Dr. Johnson.
Some of my debates with my friends and family, we have some heated debates, and it's like, I say, well, when the wolf was at, the door of African-American people, when the wolf was at our door, everyone said, oh, it's not a big deal, stop complaining. Now the wolf is at the door of all Americans, and they're talking about their fear for fascism or going back in time and all these things. And so now it's an emergency. So there is, I think, a little bit of a you know, a pushback, and where people are saying, well, why is it an emergency now? But the truth of the matter is it can get much worse. And so I do believe that we need to go out and vote in this election, but I also believe that we have to keep, you know, open our strategies going forward, as some of my colleagues here said, you know, in terms of, you know, maybe not just a two-party system, you know, maybe demonstrating, maybe reparations, redistribution of wealth. I don't think anything should be off the table as we plot our political future. So yes, voting is a key part, because it's part of our citizenship, and we have to protect it. And right now we are at a really dire and crucial point. But, you know, we have to keep our options open also going forward. I would agree.
Thank you. So before we turn it over, just make some closing remarks, and then I'll let you close out if anyone else wants to close out as well. But I start by saying, ain't I a woman? Sojourner Truth. Die or be free. Harriet Tubman. African women were doubly enslaved before emancipation, denied education, financial resources, civil liberties, and recognition. We were utterly destitute. Yet against all odds, women of color, since the Civil War, has established a remarkable record of educational, organizational, and professional achievement. Anna Cooper. I am sick and tired of being sick and tired. Fannie Lou Hamer. The drums of African beat in my heart cannot rest while there is a single Black boy or girl lacking a chance to prove their worth. Mary Bethune. If they don't give you a seat, and we heard this before, if they don't give you a seat at the table, bring a folding chair. Shirley Chisholm. I tell you what freedom is to me. No fear. Nina Simone. No, the only tired I was tired of giving in. Rosa Parks. To understand how any society functions, you must understand the relationship between the men and the women. Angela Davis. If you are to free yourselves, you must break the chains of oppression yourselves. Winnie Mandela. The kind of beauty I want most is the hard to get kind that comes from within. Strength, courage, dignity. Ruby Dee. A wise woman wishes to be no one's enemy. A wise woman refuses to be anyone's victim. Maya Angelou. The Black community has to shake off our fear, because change doesn't happen without risk. Courage can be contagious, and hope can take on a life of its own. Michelle Obama. Our purpose in life is to leave a legacy for our children and our children's children. For this reason, we must correct history that at present denies our humanity and respect. Queen Mother Moore. Words from our Black women leaders. Their words stand true today. You heard from our panelists, their work and deed as listeners and viewers. I invite you to find your voice, your words, because our work is not done yet. So I'd like to thank my panelists, Dr. Tekla Johnson, Laura Salinas, Quenisha Payne, and Clara Tando. Thank you so much. And if there's anything else you'd like to say before we turn it over to Chirl Girl.
Thank you so much. It's been an honor. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you. It's been an honor and pleasure serving as your moderator. So we'll turn it over to Chirl Girl.
I want to say thank you Thank you to all of our panelists. And we need to give a special round of applause for Miss Monica Rue. Miss Monica came through with that, didn't she? Courage is contagious. And I am so inspired in hearing from these ladies today. You know, we talked about the mothers of the movement, but I'm looking at the daughters of the movement. And I see the work that's being done. And I just want to say on behalf of everyone, thank you for your work. Thank you for your wisdom. Thank you for raising my level of civil intelligence this evening. I've got some big words. I've got a lot of phrases I'm gonna throw out there and act like I'm smart. I do know this. I know that we make a difference. Women make a difference. Black women carry a load and we make a difference. And tonight is perfect proof of it. It was such a great idea by the libraries to do this. And before we get to our closing speaker, I just want to say how grateful I am to people who work in libraries, to librarians, because they stand in the gap. One of the panelists mentioned only learning about Black women and their part in the suffrage movement, and just like it being so small. I went to Catholic school, Black history really wasn't taught, but it was a librarian who said, girl, you need to read a book. You need to know more about what's going on. So the work they do, not just giving you information, but also waking you up and making you aware and taking care of the community. Sometimes I think that task goes without enough thank yous to it. So before we go any further, thank you, ladies, thank you, gentlemen, for your work. And as we move towards our next speaker, let me tell you a little bit about him. He's a civil rights scholar, an educator, and he is a homeboy, a Charlotte native. Oh man. And he serves as a staff historian at the Levine Museum of the New South. We're going to take our civil intelligence up another notch higher. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Dr. Willie Griffin.
Thank you, Chirl Girl. I don't know how much I can raise the intelligence level after all of these dynamic speakers. I will say that I'm honored and humbled to be a part of this event that has highlighted so many strong Black voices and Black women's voices. It was dynamic. I'm inspired by them all, particularly those young voices. You give me hope as a father of two daughters as I send them out into the world. I know that they will have a path that is well lit to follow. So again, I'm honored to be able to speak to you tonight, and putting me at the end places me in a hard, between a rock and a hard place, because as I said, this has been a dynamic event. But what I want to try to do is to situate us and sort of place these speakers in a longer continuum. They stand on the shoulders of many who have come before us, and they have picked up the mantle and are helping move us forward. Before I get started into my comments, I definitely have to pay respects to my longtime mentor, Dr. Rosalind Terborg Penn, whose work really sought to ensure that Black women's voices were not erased from this long history of suffrage. Her book, African American Women in the Struggle to Vote, 1850 through 1920, is considered the bedrock for studying African American women and in this period. But over a little over 2 months ago marked the centennial anniversary of the 19th Amendment ratification. Women's suffrage became the right of all women citizens to vote after a 60-year process that officially began in 1848. It is important to remember that African American women suffragists were there from the beginning and at the end of the struggle, and they still remain. By the turn of the 20th century, many doubted whether the amendment would include African American women. Suffragists, I want to remind people, included both women and men who either joined Women's Suffragist Association, they wrote articles in support of women's suffrage, they participated in women's suffrage convention rallies, parades, and or gave speeches in support of the movement. Many of you have heard the name Mary Church Terrell tonight, or Ida B. Wells Barnett. Both were women suffragists, as well as Frederick Douglass and W.B. Du Bois. Terrell was the first president of the National Association of Colored Women. the NACW, which was founded in 1896 to ensure that Black women would not be excluded from the movement. Right here in North Carolina, the North Carolina Federation of Negro Women's Clubs that Dr. Johnson mentioned was the outgrowth of the NACW, and it was founded in 1909 by Dr. Charlotte Hawkins Brown, who was a giant in the field of education and who founded the Palmer Institute, not too far from where Dr. Alma Adams was born on the other side of Greensboro. Other founding members included our very own Charlotte native, Minnie Sumner Pearson, who was a teacher at Meyer Street Graded School, Cottie Dancy Moore, Maggie Jones, and Julia Warren. And so these are the kinds of women that we have to work to lift and recover their stories so that they can add more inspiration or provide more inspiration for young women who are seeking to make a difference. The North Carolina Federation of Negro Women's Clubs motto was "Lift as we climb." It's an important motto that we should all adopt. In addition to fighting for voting rights for Black women, they fought for healthcare issues, a lot like Dr. Adams continues to fight for. They fought for children's and seniors' rights that one of our panelists, Claire, continues to fight for, and educational opportunities that Laura and as well as Quenisha also fought for, and they supported the NAACP. During the first 2 decades of the 20th century, leading up to the amendment vote, these Black mothers of the suffragist movement lobbied hard, urging enfranchised students to vote against anti-suffrage members of state legislature and members of the Congress up for re-election in 1918. African-American women in states with large urban centers such as Illinois, New York, and Texas won the right to vote even before the amendment was ratified. And so the history is a little more complex than we make it out to be. So it's always important that we try to understand it with as much depth as possible. They worked tirelessly to elect legislatures who would vote for ratification of the amendment in their states. But fortunately, the final bill did not exclude any women citizens regardless of race. Congress passed the 19th Amendment on June 4th, 1919, and sent the bill to the states to be ratified. Ratification needed 36 of the 48 states, and not surprisingly, Illinois, New York, and Texas were among the first. However, the process took over a year to be accomplished. The struggle was not over. Of the 36 states who voted for ratification, only 4, in addition to Texas, came from the South. They included Arkansas, Kentucky, West Virginia, and Tennessee. North Carolina had the opportunity to become the 36th state to ratify the amendment when it reached the legislature in August of 1920, but state representatives could not agree on whether or not to recognize women's suffrage rights. And Tennessee slipped in, became the 36th state to ratify on August 18th of 1920. The ratified bill sent back to Congress for final approval occurred on August 20th, 1920, which was just over 100 years ago. None of the states that ratified the 19th Amendment were located in the Deep South, where the majority of African-American women lived and whose mobilization of suffrage created a major threat for white supremacy. And this is where the civil rights movement picks up, that Dr. Johnson so eloquently encapsulated for us. Consequently, by the late 1920s, the majority of African-Americans living in the Deep South lost their right to vote and did not regain it until 1965 with the Voting Rights Act, or the Voting Rights Bill. But nonetheless, the remaining Southern states rejected 19th Amendment's ratification and did not vote to affirm it from between 1923 and 1984. The last 2 states to ratify were North Carolina, believe it or not, in 1971, and Mississippi in 1984. In spite of North Carolina's resistance, other prominent women, local women of note, played a central role in continuing to advocate for Black women's voting rights. And they included Mary Lynch and Mary Jackson Mcquarrie, who was a true powerhouse in the Black women's political realm of the state. Mcquarrie, you should recognize the name for all those JCSU alumni and faculty. Mcquarrie was the wife of Henry Lawrence Mcquarrie and the longtime president of Johnson C. Smith. She made it an unsuccessful bid for a local school board in 1937, making her the very first Black woman to run for an elected office in the state. And she continued to push for voting rights even after the 19th Amendment was passed, as well as fighting against crime and education. So the bittersweet legacy of women's suffrage movement remain long past anniversary of the ratification. Those Black women who were the first to carry the struggle on the national stage included women like Shirley Chisholm, whose name you've heard, who was from Brooklyn, New York, and became the first African-American woman elected to the House of Representatives. And in 1993, Carol Moseley Braun from Illinois, who you also heard, who became the first African-American woman elected to the US Senate. They opened the door for at least 45 other women of color that includes the likes of Barbara Jordan, Sheila Jackson, Maxine Waters, and Eva Clayton, another JCSU alumni, as well as Kamala Harris and Dr. Adams. These women have continued the struggle in advancing women's rights, and I hope that you all have listened and learned from the voices that you have heard here tonight and can now see yourselves in the struggle and will continue to push forward the fight. And I'll turn it back over to Chirl Girl.
Well, thank you so much, Dr. Griffin. We appreciate your words and your wisdom. Can we get a round of applause for him? I need everybody to wake up. It's not over. We got to bring the fun back in there because it's all about what happens next Tuesday. And the more you know, the better you can make decisions. So let's give away some prizes. Now, we're doing this in conjunction with Johnson C. Smith University, and there was a competition among the students, and the first 10 people that enrolled for our program this evening will receive an email tomorrow letting them know that they won a swag bag. Yay! So not only did you learn something, but you win something in the process. And we had other contests going on too. I want to announce the winner of the School Spirit Award. That goes to Rakia Bellamy. Yay, Rakia. I see you, Rakia. Okay, she's representing for her school. She's got her shirt on. She's got her bags, representing those HBCUs. Congratulations to you. Our next award is the second place Selfie Award, and it goes to Kizzy Samuel Parsons. Congratulations, Kizzy. You see she wrote in there, I voted early. Good for you. And last but not least, first place. Everybody wants first place. Our first place winner in the Engage Her Award, the Johnson C. Smith University edition, goes to Whitney Behringer. Where you at, Whit? I see you. She voted early too. And she says, make sure that you get out and vote. Be the change. And everyone that we've shown this evening, everyone speaking, is part of the change. So congratulations to all of our winners. And if you're one of the first 10 people, like I said before, you will receive an email and letting you know about your swag bag. I just want to take a moment to say thank you to everyone who has worked so hard to make this evening amazing and a complete success. Thank you to all of our panelists. A very special thank you to Congresswoman Alma S. Now, if she don't set you on fire, I don't know who will. So many words of wisdom. Outstanding job done by Monica Rue. And all of you ladies that were on the panel today, thank you. And I want to see your names on a ballot somewhere because I promise you, I'll vote for all y'all. Y'all did your thing and you know what you're talking about. And I think you've gotten everybody inspired to go out and do more. We also want to say thank you to all of our partners who made tonight possible. And as I said, this is streaming on Facebook, the Charlotte Mecklenburg Library's Facebook page, and on their YouTube channel. If you didn't catch everything, you can go back. I encourage you, if you don't have a library card, get one. You can go to cmlibrary.org and they will take you through all the steps so that you can be engaged. Also, my list of thank yous. Thank you to the Johnson C. Smith University staff. Thank you to Brandon Lunsford, University Archivist. Also, Frank D. Dorsey. And to all the students who came out this evening. And I hope I didn't miss anyone. I hope that everyone caught that fire. I hope that everyone, if you're here at this meeting, you've probably already voted or you're going to vote soon. So if you've already voted, make a point, make a pledge on Tuesday to take someone out to the polls. Make a pledge to call 10 people. Make a pledge to make a donation to the We Can Make a Difference, because this election, everything is on the line, everything. So women, it's always been there. Like the great women we've talked about this evening, we've seen their work and we see how it's impacted us. And now it's your responsibility. If you're part of this, you're here for a reason. And I encourage everyone to get out and vote. Once again, for more details and for more information to learn more about tonight's programming, please log on to cmlibrary.org. Thank you. Have a great evening and go vote. Go JCSU. Love y'all.